up here. Y'all remember Marlene? And so one of the things that we also had to do was a new pronouncement that came into effect this year. We referred to it as GASB number 68, the Government Accounting Standards Board number 68. And what it did is it had, it required booking the certain pension plan liabilities or assets, okay, which is something new. We've always had to identify them in the footnotes, but they weren't always recorded in the books, okay? And so now they're being recorded in the books, and it didn't impact the general fund because it's a long-term liability, and the general fund doesn't record long-term liabilities. So it's a peculiarity, but the proprietary funds do record them. So there is a slight change in the, in fact, let's go to that exhibit in the bound audit statement. It is page 22. And these are kind of small numbers, so I don't have my reading glasses. I don't know if you need yours, but I'll play trombone here and see if I can. You look at the asset section up there on top. There's a line about halfway down in the page called deferred outflows of resources. And this line relates to the pension plan. And then up above in the non-current asset, you see a net pension asset. It's got 225,000 in the water fund and 178. So that also is related to the GASB 68. And then, you know, she could do this. She doesn't like the sound of my voice. Then further down in the liability section is the deferred inflows and outflows of resources. So this, again, that doesn't change the activity. Well, it does somewhat, just a very small amount, because the city is the current requirement into the pension fund every year. So we're not building up a liability, nor are we, in fact, the city's fully funded. And so other governmental entities are having to pay more than the current requirement because they had a large gap from what should have been paid. And so a lot of governmental entities have to pay a little bit more than the current requirement as a catch-up. So Alpine really is in good shape from their pension funding standpoint. So you don't have that negative impact from this pronouncement. And then the same thing on the gas fund. The graph didn't change really on it, just this little bit due to the GASB 68. So from the graphs standpoint, again, very little change. Now you have the audit value open. Go to page 15, please.
Correct. Are we done with the slides?
Yes. Yeah. So that's much better. I need to start getting my cell phone out, shining it on the pages on the video. You'll see similar accounts here on this. Now this is the government-wide statements. So you look down in the asset section, page 15, and about halfway down through the asset section, you see the net pension asset. So that's showing up, and then the bottom of the asset section, the deferred outflows, where you see those numbers coming up, and then the halfway down in the liability section, you see the deferred inflows. Okay, so these deferred items, they up until a couple years ago, they would have been considered an asset, but we had another pronouncement that decided, no, we don't want those in assets or liabilities. We're going to make special sections for them, but they're still totaled up in those sections. It's supposed to make things a little more understandable, but my experience is it makes it a little harder to understand. I don't write the rules. So from a financial standpoint, the other change you see back on page 22 and 23, there's a new column, and that's the insurance fund. So there's a column for the balance sheet and a column for the income statement for revenues, expenses, and so forth. So you can see how it's been pulled out, and now it will be accounted for on its own, and each month it's not going to be kind of mucking up the general fund's reports, because it's going to be completely pulled out and be reported separately, so much cleaner. The other items that I would like to just mention, it has to do with the findings, and if you can flip back to page 77. We still have the same 4 findings. However, auditors are kind of like a bulldog with a bone. Once we get a hold of something, we're not going to let it go until it's completely cleared up. And so, even though there has been significant improvement, we couldn't remove them because the issues were not entirely cleared up for the year. Now, I fully expect these to go away next year. Megan's shaking her head, or nodding her head. Yes. We're halfway through the year. And so last year when we issued the audit, half the year was over. But I believe the systems are in place now. Well, there's still some tweaking of the software that needs to take place. Because every time like an accounts payable run is posted, some of it's just being posted to the wrong place. And that's an automatic entry. And so what staff has to do is move it from that account over to the appropriate account. So there's some tweaking that needs to be done. But other than that, I believe systems are in place to address these issues.
The same thing with the due to funds. A lot of it has to do with the way the system was originally set up when it was purchased. So again, that should be fixed once the system is changed and set up to appropriately account for transfers into two funds. So that kind of go away also.
The number 3 has to do with the year-end cutoff procedures. And again, the bulk of that has to do with using the system appropriately. And then the number 4 is the closing of the prior year. And then I think we mentioned how you take the balances and you roll them forward to the next year. And there's some little hiccup in the setup that those balances aren't rolling forward properly. And so they have to be adjusted for the opening balances to be corrected. So from what I recall with our discussions with Megan is she has identified the reason it's happening, and so hopefully we can get, like I said, get the setup tweaked so we don't have these issues.
Are you saying that this is all software related?
Certainly the roll forward has to be software related. Is there anything else that could have impacted it? I mean,
Input?
well, but see, once you close,
It should roll over?
yes, it should roll over. And I don't know, were there entries that were posted after the closing that caused? Is that, okay, so that was part of it. So it was procedural. Part of it was procedural. There were actual entries posted after the close was done, should have gone into the next year's activity. So it had to be moved. Okay, so part was procedural. But I assume your staff have been instructed. And, yeah. So, and again, last year's audit, these comments were not shared until we were halfway through with that year. So the roll forward was already done. So we're not expecting to see these findings next year. And I don't need a wink and a nod because that's what I mean. I truly do not expect to see it. The separate letter that was provided to you as well, it's on letterhead. That's what we refer to as the management letter. And this is where we share our recommendations for other improvements that are not findings. So they're procedural related and so forth. We have a number of them, and we also have the prior year comments to let you know. I believe of the prior year comments, which are back on page 10, 8 of them have been completely cleared up, and 12 of them were repeated in some form. So if you just look at the current year comments starting on page 4, it includes any from the prior year that have not been completely cleared up. Now, one thing, and I shared this with the mayor earlier when he first got here, one thing that I need to make sure everybody understands, we have a number of comments again this year, as we did in the prior year. And I do not want that to be interpreted as that there's not been any progress, because that's incorrect. There's been a significant amount of progress. Once certain systems are put in place and procedures are adopted, it allows us to dig deeper into other areas so we can find other areas that need attention. Also, some of the comments, there's like, we found 2 items out of 100 or whatever. that had an issue, whereas the prior year, there was probably a dozen or so. So it's important for you to understand that there has been significant progress, and we really encourage administration here to, or not school district, business management, to continue implementing these systems and fine tuning them, because the city here ran for many years with somewhat loose controls and lack of procedures. And I'm not joking here, I'm trying to be serious. And
well, I know it better. It was loose years ago. I agree with it.
But to get your staff to implement controls after they kind of followed their own drummer for years and years is a struggle. And so we have seen significant progress in the purchase orders and the accounts payable and the payroll. But there's still room for improvement. And so that's what we're citing here in the management letter. And I think the comments are pretty straightforward, and management has responded to let you know what they're doing or plan to do on each one of those. So if you had specific questions on any of them,
Are you done? So we can open the questions.
please do.
Okay, Councilman, you have the first shot. Just throw questions at the end. Sort of, and then one after another.
So I have a number of questions. Help me understand the relationship between this document and this document.
Okay, the draft was something that Eric wanted us to come and give you what we had so far.
Right.
And so that's what the draft was. It was what we had so far. This is the final document. These are the real numbers. So you should destroy the draft, because that was just a working document.
Yeah, and we got this tonight, though.
Well, the difference between them is the GASB 68, because that did require numerous entries to get that recorded properly. So that's one difference. And that was a pension asset. So that was actually, you're booking an asset, and it decreased the expense a little bit in the proprietary fund. So, and then the other item, I cannot remember in the draft, it had the internal service.
No, and
The draft.
moving the
moving
internal
of the
service fund out. So
So those are the two main differences.
Yeah, I was just looking at page 9, and I saw a number of differences, and I was trying to reconcile them. Not what I expected. I was over time walking through it, so
on the MD&A.
I just,
What was the time lag between the first document, the draft that we got, and the final copy? I mean, you said there are differences. What was the reason? You already mentioned the gas fee. Did you didn't have enough time to do all that in the draft?
Right. It was just a matter of when we got the information, when we were able
It makes
to
it difficult
do it.
the council. I don't know which way Rick is going. It makes it difficult for the council, at least for me. I don't do this page by page. And with this one, I'm sure there's not much qualitative difference. But to have it right now and then look at it in 2 pages is kind of difficult. But anyway, go ahead.
yeah, that was just a struggle, because what I noticed, for example, on basically the city balance sheet, government business type of activities, the bottom lines are the same, but other numbers leading up to it are different. And so that's what I was trying to
Are you talking
understand.
about in the MD&A?
Page 9
Page 9.
or 8.
Page 9. Page 9, for example, the draft shows city property tax 2015 at $1.3 million, here it's $1.6 million. Okay, and yet the bottom line number of the $24,000,008 in terms of pending position is the same for both documents. So I'm just trying to understand what's gone on.
So On that one, there was a formula in the draft. So the debt service property tax was being shown under operating grants and contributions. So that was moved to property tax, the correct category.
Okay. Okay, so what you're telling me is the only difference financially is some things may have gotten moved around in terms of what gets, or you from an audit standpoint classified.
Other than the GASB
I
68.
understand the
So the
guys.
self-insurance one and the GASB 68 were the main changes. Other than that, we tried to break out things more properly. For instance, if you look at page 16 and 17,
Yep.
in the draft, there was just one line for property taxes. And now we have it, the property tax for general purpose and the property tax for debt service.
Okay.
So it's just trying to give more information, more detail.
So some feedback from someone who's read a lot of financial reports, a lot of audits. You put us at a disadvantage when we get a new document and move things around after we've spent considerable time going through it, making notes, and trying to understand what's going on.
I agree.
Back to you.
I do not like issuing draft audits.
And we don't like looking at something without having the opportunity to go through it. So you gotta give us a draft. And if it needs more sync time, you need to tell us. Okay?
But
I'm looking at, again, going back to page 9, for example. Those things are important in the way to make decisions for the council in terms of policy and everything. Property taxes. In the draft, when you compare 2014 and 2015, it shows a drop in property taxes. And the new document, it shows an increase that to the tune of about $300,000. So you didn't have those numbers at the time of the draft.
That's what I just explained
So
where,
that's right. That came out of one bucket, put it another one. They had it, they just classified it in different buckets.
I just want to get zero on that. So there was,
right.
okay.
And honestly, this is a timing issue, and we can only work on it as soon as we get the information. Okay? We don't generate the information. So there were delays in getting the information from your folks, and this gets back to a lot of the procedures, because if the system puts things in the wrong place, then people have to go back and research and figure out where it's supposed to go. So now we're way behind the schedule. There is a March 31st deadline for one-year reportings, I believe. Is that correct? And so there was a big push to get it done. And I guess it was already on the agenda. And so it was decided, well, then let's give a draft of what we have so far. And I agree with you 100%. I do not like issuing drafts unless it's just because you want to look at it before you, say, print it. So I'm 100% with you, but the timing is out of our hands when we don't have the information.
Okay, so that's something.
One of the things I was going to share on the property tax side that we implemented over the last couple of years has been the designation of dollars as they come into the interest and sinking fund. So that's where I got a little, I'm putting the MD&A together. I saw the 1.305 and I knew that was what we were bringing in for operations. In reality, you know, if you look at page 17, it does show that 1.305 plus the 296, which was for the debt service. So I missed catching that on the original MD&A because I was thinking, you know, we've tried to throttle back from a budgetary perspective and make sure that we're allocating dollars in INS to pay the debt service and only recognize the dollars that are coming in that we can spend on general fund type activities, streets, roads, and parks.
So the good news is assets are up on the positive side. Assets are up $1.6 million. right? Debt is down 500 million, or 500,000. Our net position for cities improved by $2.1 million, which is a terrific result. So from that standpoint, that's what I, and then total city debt right now, long-term $6.5 million, which is the reduction of the $500,000 debt. So from a city standpoint, we're significantly better financial results than we were last year. That's the good news of it. So I was putting before on procedure, trying to work my way through and understand numbers. But that's the great news story. We're spending about $317,000 a year to service our debt, including principal and interest, which is not too bad. And you guys are trying to help us understand how to account for the pension side. And that's an offline. You all look at pension return rates that other cities look at?
No, we have nothing to do with the pension.
Yeah.
It's just whatever.
I do the accounting for it.
Right. Yeah, we don't even do the accounting. We just incorporate their numbers into the.
So you just do TMRS and flow through.
Correct. They have their own auditors that audit their activities. So we rely on that information. And before this year, it really only came into the footnotes. Now it actually comes into the financial statements.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, so you can come back. Go ahead. I would like to set a random, as long as you don't interfere with you. Go ahead.
I'll raise my hand.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
So I understand what you did here. You used the information that you had, and now you've created this document. Okay. But on this document, your letter, where you're pointing out some of the errors that the city has made, are you saying that because you gave that information 6 months later, that they didn't have time to repair some of these? So that's why we had, what, 12 repeats on this year?
For some, once we issue, just like tonight, 6 months have already gone by and the transactions have occurred and have been recorded. Okay, so I'm saying that they did not go back and try to redo that 6 months. They started implementing new procedures as time allowed for the remainder of the fiscal year.
So in effect, if you're saying that they've already done some of these things, then why bring them up?
Because
Why not modify it like you did this document?
because we have not audited where they have made these other corrections. We are,
These are new, but I'm talking about the old ones.
because when we audited them, we're telling you what we found.
Right.
And we found errors in the last year's activity.
I agree.
And so we are reporting what we found to you.
Okay.
So we're hoping that in next year's audit, that the procedures that they have implemented will have alleviated those errors in those
In those
areas.
2 years, you're counting the first, 14, and now we're in 15, and you're saying some of these have been duplicated. We're still doing them or not doing it. And some of them we've taken care of. They've already taken care of it. You send this to management, and they said, here's what we're going to do, right?
Right.
So why bring it up if it's already corrected? Like you said, I mean, why sugarcoat it and say,
No, because we haven't seen for our own eyes that it's been corrected. We need to audit the following year to see that it has been corrected.
okay, so then let's go back to 14. In 14, there were certain amount of items that were not procedural or done correctly or whatever the reason, that you wrote them down. And now we're finding out that there's 12 items that were repeated. Is that correct?
Well, some of them may not be repeated exactly. And that's why, for instance, one of them was on the procurement policies. Policies were put in place, but they still need some tweaking. Kind of like how we say, you know, our initial risk in 14 was you need to get policies in place. You have policies in place, but there are some details that maybe need to be added. So we have a current year comment on adding those additional details. So it's repeated, but it's to make it even better. So they may be repeated, but not exactly the same comment. And so that's why we give you both last year's comments and this year, so you can see there was improvement. However, we still need to make more improvements. And on disbursements, sometimes last year there could have been, you know, more exceptions. This year we only had a few, but we want us to let you know, you know, there's still exceptions, not as many in volume, but there's still some showing up. So there is improvement.
Let me give you an example, if I may, on page 10. Number 3, while testing non-payroll disbursements, we noted that the majority of the transactions did not reference a PO. If you go to number 1 on page 4, this is the repeat. While testing non-payroll disbursements, we noted 3 transactions did not have a PO. Okay, so there's been improvement, significant improvement, but we still saw 3. So we're telling you, this is what we found. We're not holding back as to, well, there was good improvement. We want the council to know exactly what we're finding. So when I say there's been significant improvement, I think that kind of shows you what we're talking about.
What about number 2 while you're there?
What page is that?
On page
Page
4,
4.
we noticed 2 instances where a vendor invoice was paid twice. Is that a repeat? Yeah, in fact, that's number 5 on page 10. In our testing, we noted 2 instances as well. So they still need to work on their procedures for matching invoice numbers.
But, you know, I can see that one, you know, being brought up, but there's no instance that things are getting better in that situation.
Well, maybe not that one, but obviously.
I realize that they're not the same item that's being paid twice, but the fact that there are items that are being paid twice. And in this case, it took a year to get the money back? Is that what we're saying?
Because that vendor, from my understanding, doesn't show that you overpaid. Is that correct? Yes.
Well, if somebody paid me twice, I think I'd keep quiet too.
Okay, you had, go ahead.
The vendor that was in question is they had a credit on the books, but it never got applied to the next, and it's a monthly payment vendor we have. It just never got applied to the next one. And with everything, sometimes we get a little behind and remember, okay, yeah, I need to ask that vendor, can you apply that credit? We just fell behind on that. So when it was brought up, we immediately said, well, we don't want the credit, we want the refund, and we got the check back with the vendor.
So the procedure here would be to check invoices with checks to make sure that we're paying the right amount.
Right, the accounts payable system should be based on an invoice number and not a statement. And so, the system should not allow you to input an invoice number twice.
So you're saying it's a software problem?
Well, I don't know in this
This
situation.
isn't a software problem. We input the vendor invoice numbers. This vendor in question, actually, 2 employees had entered the invoice. We no longer have 2 employees doing invoices. We only have 1. And then she has steps. She searches by vendor name, she searches by vendor invoice number, and if it comes down to it, she can pull the actual folder with all the checks in it to double check to make sure. We've also implemented a third process where all the bills are gone over with myself and her at the same time, so we can make sure the amounts are correct, that they're not double entered, and that they're a capital asset.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I too have been around audits quite a bit myself too. And there's always going to be audit points.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect audit, and you can always have improvement. Right. So, you know, I think to make a heck of a good progress, you know, nothing's perfect. There is no perfect world. Voltaire's Candide, right? Best of all possible worlds. But I think you did a heck of a good job. To be honest with you. Yeah, I just wanted to make that comment.
Okay. One more time for the council before it passes the ordinance. I'd like to come back to I'm gonna open this to the audience, but again, please remember what I have to say. Your voice low, nothing personal. Okay, it's not his auditor's fault. It's not the man. It's just we have some numbers here. We have some data. We've already heard from the auditor. And if you have any comments to make, a question to ask for clarification, and you need to identify yourself, the name, the ward, and what the question is. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Fitch.
Should I do it from here or from?
I think it's easier for you to answer from there, right? Yeah, you can stay here. You can stay here if you want.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm Andrew Pritchard. I live in Ward 1. I think the audit report, as I've said before, is one of the most important topics that council will take up in a given fiscal year along with the budget earlier. Now, the audit report ought to be disseminated in a way to the public that is able to consume it and comprehend it. I have called Megan today and I asked if I could have a look at the audit report, and she said, no, you can't. I asked her if there are any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the current report. She said, I can't tell you, come to the meeting tonight.
Okay.
Now, last year I showed up, couldn't ask any questions, we didn't have any information. 3 days later, I picked up my copy of the audit report. This is for 13-14. The presentation that was made took all of 5 minutes and everything was wonderful. Improvements were being made and we're making progress.
Let me just stop you right now. Since you raised a question, so I'm going to ask the lawyer sitting over there, so we don't blame Megan for something, you know. If it is legally,
I'm not questioning.
no, still, let me just, okay. Mr. Lawyer, did you hear the question? Let me put the question to you. Our finance director was asked for a copy of the audit report before the council had a chance to talk about it. And the finance director said, no, you cannot give it to the public till after we have discussed this at the council. Is that okay for us to say to the public we cannot give it to you? Do you understand the question?
So the question is,
Question
for the
Question is,
audit report.
okay, All right, yes. Yes, go ahead. Uh-huh.
It would be record, open record request, then the city has 10 days to.
And then you asked the question.
I heard the answer, Mr. Mayor, and we've gone to the previous years. But I go back to the old days.
No, that's okay. Let's not go
All right.
back to the old days. It makes you feel old.
The point,
I'm not beginning, but I want you to understand what you were told. You got the answer from the lawyer. And I understand if I were you, I would have the same problem, okay? But then there's certain legalities or whatever you have to face.
well, again, last year, after the presentation, a week later, I came in, requested the audit report, and I received it. I paid $7.20 for it. I have my receipt here. I learned as I read through the thing that there were actually 2 material weaknesses and 2 significant deficiencies. Now, the material weakness, to me, is a very serious violation of proper financial processes. In fact, the auditor in his letter last year said, this is last year's report, the material weakness is a deficiency or a combination of deficiencies in internal control such that there is reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the entity's financial statement will not be prevented or detected or corrected on a timely basis. I just heard the auditor say again that these same 4 discrepancies, 2 material weaknesses, 2 significant deficiencies, are repeated again this year. What is wrong with management here?
Okay, you can
And
go ahead, I'm listening.
the auditor then goes on in his letter last year, and I haven't seen this year, I don't know what's in there, but he said, accordingly,
Just a minute. I think why don't you ask the auditor if he can educate you about this question, if there's anything in this year's audit that he may like in writing.
Well, he said it, I heard him say that it was the same discrepancies, that were reported last year.
We have,
How many,
Listen, let him respond.
we have 4 similar findings.
are they material weaknesses or are they significant deficiencies?
All 4? There were?
Well, that's serious.
Just gonna let him respond. Okay? Just gonna jump in.
Yes.
Okay, please.
The 4 of them were still classified as material weaknesses.
Okay. So you got the answer. I want you to stay current, okay? What happened last year, there's no control I have. I want you to, if you have a question, ask the auditor. And if he says whatever his answer is, then you can just respond.
Mr. Auditor, the 4 discrepancies that were listed in the 2 material weaknesses and 2 significant deficiencies are identical for this current year? Or for the 14-15 year that the audit report is being presented here today?
Again, I wouldn't say they were exactly identical, because we were saying, that, for instance, management is doing reconciliations on a more regular basis. Just everything was not cleared up, so we could not completely clear off that finding. So there's still work that needs to be done on a monthly basis and then at year end also in order to get rid of the finding. So they're not identical. I mean, they're very similar, but there were improvements. They are doing more monthly reconciliations.
Well, 2 of these significant deficiencies have been converted into 2 material weaknesses, which is a more serious violation of proper financial conduct. Now, the conclusion that I draw from this, Mr. Mayor, and here's something that I didn't understand last year, and I don't know whether it's in this year's report, but the auditor last year said, accordingly, we do not express an opinion on the effectiveness of the city of Alpine, Texas's internal control. So, if I read that sentence,
But that's a generic statement that they make every time. I see
We
that.
prohibited from
Okay.
issuing an opinion on that.
well,
That's
That's a
that
caveat.
is a
But-
standard.
let me give you my opinion as Citizen Fritchie here. That
This year's, okay? I'm not-
this year,
I'm not concerned.
well, he said,
Based on whatever he
that's the
said.
same, four material weaknesses are serious deficiency, Mr. Mayor. And my conclusion is that financial management of this city is severely deficient, and council ought to do something about it. To Mr. Rick, I would ask again, is the airport finally?
No. I'm not gonna let you divert from what it's all about, okay? Okay? I'm not going to let you. You're my neighbor, but I'm conducting a meeting and I have to do certain in a certain way. You can talk with him outside the meeting if you want to, but not here. Fine, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's your thing. You're welcome. Okay, any other person who wants to make a comment? Yes, sir. Now, you heard me how I'm gonna conduct, okay? So I don't want to make it into another.
I think this, my name is Joseph Goldman and I'm on Board 1. In the case where there is the audit has certain time requirements, that is time requirements for final data to go into the audit for consideration, and then a preliminary document is made based on that, so that the people who have to make decisions based on the audit can study the entire audit. And then when the final audit is presented to them, depending on the time that transpires between the initial draft, if you want to call it, and the final, usually a sheet that indicates where changes were from the draft to the final comes along with the final report, so that the people who have to pass judgment, who have to review it, don't have to go over the entire document again. They can just look at the things that have been noted that have been changed. And I think in this case, it sounds like that would have helped a great deal. I thought that was standard procedure. It has been in any of the organizations and corporations that I've been involved in. So,
Thank you. That was a good suggestion. Okay, any other comment? Okay, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, but Willis, Ward 1. Mayor, I just want to say something. You had stayed signing checks in your little office over there. Those 2 checks would have gone by duplicated because you were always watching out for those. That's all I have to say.
Any other comment? Okay, I'm gonna come back to the council if you have any comment to make. A question? Okay, do you have any? Sorry. Okay. I have just a question which has always puzzled me. This fund balance, and the general fund, it said is minus 531,000 on page 18, page 55, page 60.
Particular fund, so in the general fund, there are certain restrictions, and whatever is left over is what's called the unassigned. So once, in fact, if you go back to that one graph on the fund, the general fund equity, You remember the 2 years before we started, you showed positive fund equity. For the first year, we realized that there were certain reporting inconsistencies with the prior statements. And so we had to move certain activity out of the general fund into various other funds. One such thing is the debt service activity, the property tax that you collect for debt service is restricted for debt service activity, can't be used for anything else. And that was being dumped into the general fund and just treated as part of the general fund. Well, obviously that was a significant issue that needed to be rectified. So a significant amount of equity came out. There were several special revenue activities that are required to be presented in separate funds. So those also got pulled out. Once that was done, what was determined was basically the general fund had borrowed money from various other funds to operate. And that's why they had a deficit in their equity accounts. And that's why we previously had commented how pleased we were with seeing that deficit decrease.
Yes.
And that has to do with the fact that y'all are budgeting appropriately and sticking to your budget. You know, when someone calls up and says, sure be great if you would repave the street in front of my house. Well, instead of saying, okay, yeah, let's do that, now we say, well, you know what? It's not in the budget. We're working on it. Maybe we can get it in there next year, the year after, but it's just not budgeted at this time.
So once you're watching one, so it's not a negative cash.
No.
That's what I'm not thinking, because we used to have statement coming to us from the auditor and others when I was a councilor. Well, there's a lot of money in the fund balance. Let's use it. You know. And but now I said bookkeeping. Money is there, but it's not.
But you have good cash flow, and the activity, the fact that that deficit's going down indicates that you are you have more revenue than expenditures.
The last one that I have is, you have answered that earlier too. This is to reassure the retirees, we have plenty of money in the retirement fund to take care of them.
Right, you're fully funded in your pension plan,
So we want to make sure.
which is very unusual in this day.
There were 69 people who are either active or inactive or entitled to them.
You're not like Chicago, where they're trying to cut it back.
Well, I just want to make sure that they know that. You know, sure, that's what I want to make sure that they understand. You know, instead of hearing the rumors and this and that, all this stuff. The things come back and start rolling in management. So, hey, here's the money. So that's the
Following the mayor's comment, isn't that really the basis behind the four material weaknesses? Because there was money moved around, bucket to bucket, without the proper to from, and without, and because that got created, you had some potential issues year over year. Has been cleaned up significantly, right? Which is my understanding why, you know, your strategies leave these as material weaknesses, but you're wanting to get these items cleaned up, which are in some part tied to procedure. We weren't doing a two-from problem before. We didn't have separate accounts. And as a result, to the mayor's point, and to your point, with this big bucket of money sitting there, we didn't actually know what our liabilities were to kind of balance those out.
Correct.
And so that's really the nature behind what these four material weaknesses are. And what I hear you saying is progress is being made. It's not all the way complete yet. You can't make a report on what's gone on in 2016, 17, because you won't look at that until this time next year. But given what you've seen, you'll expect those to clear up.
I think you hit the nail on the head.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure I clarify that. Thanks.
That's the kind of statement I would like, clear statement, everybody understand. Okay. Yeah, right.
I wanted to ask about, you were talking about money being moved without proper procedure. If money is put aside by resolution, regardless of where the money's coming from, they said, here's money and we want this money to be held. What is the procedure to get it back? If you're putting it in the general fund, how do you get it restored to where it belongs?
Can you give me an example so I can make sure I understand exactly? Are you talking like the debt service?
I'm talking about parks money was put aside and a resolution was made to have this money put aside.
Are you talking about the 88,000?
Yes.
Okay.
That, when you pass a resolution to commit fund balance, you're not actually putting cash aside, you're committing part of your equity. Okay, so there's not a cash account with that name on it. It's a matter of basically restricting the equity. Now, when you see restricted cash, that's because an outside entity has given you money for whatever purpose, and there are strings attached to the cash. And so when that cash comes in, then it sits in a restricted account.
But let's say it didn't get put in a restricted account. We did get this cash from somewhere else. Not money decided that we're going to take it out of general fund. It came from the gas department, and when we were part owners of it, okay, $88,000 split two ways for two different parts. Resolution was made that this money was to be carried over every budget year until it was used. And it was put in the CD, but somewhere down the line, this money was moved and moved into general fund. I'm trying to figure out how to recover this money.
Okay,
He's got a credit vote.
right, but the committed fund balance is still there.
The man asked me for an example, and they're the ones that said 88,000, not me.
And I guess the lawyer says, that's it. We'll talk about it. Okay, maybe we can put this an item at the next council. I mean, I agree with your question, but then I'm bound by that fellow sitting over there. That's my constraint. Give me the question.
I have a question. I'm not sure if this is related to Megan or to Eric, but how many times did we duplicate checks? Was it just that one that was in our report? That one time?
How many times have we had duplicate checks?
Duplicate payment.
Duplicate payment,
We're aware of two.
right?
Well, they
Just
they
what was in
were
our-
shown, but I caught at least a couple,
That actually went out to vendors.
yeah, two that went out to vendors.
So that's it, right? Just the
But,
two that.
yeah.
There was two others I know off the top of my head, but we caught them, like we mailed the check and the next day my employee came in and said, I made a mistake. So then we called the vendor, they mailed the check back, they didn't even cash it. The other vendor, we caught it and they applied a credit actually on the statement, and that carried over and paid the next invoice. Same department, so it wasn't, so we caught a couple, or the ones that I know. Everything else, the ones that he caught were, I mean, we knew, but we just didn't follow through. And we've implemented all the new procedures.
So it's not repeating itself?
No.
Okay.
And at the beginning of last fiscal year, we had multiple people doing invoices, and we streamlined it, so there's just one.
One of the things we've done too, Councilor Salas, is put all the listing of all the checks on the website so that people can go through and review them as well. So we'll try to do that.
And a
Yes,
comment
ma'am.
with the checks is you have to be aware that there are certain vendors that hit certain departments. We've utilized trying to like more to value each of the different, the general fund, gas, water, sewer, sanitation, have their own accounts. So those checks hit those accounts. We have more to value, more to value, more to value. Verizon hits the whole city as a whole. So we have to, go to the correct account to make sure that they're paid correctly. So you'll see the same vendor with the same check number on the different check registers. But if you add them up, that's what the invoice is total. So the amounts won't be the exact. So you'll see duplicate vendors, and I mean, some people have questions, well, why are you paying, the same vendor 3 times? It's not that we're paying them 3 times, is we have 3 different checking accounts, 1 invoice. Verizon doesn't want to separate it on that. So
That's fine, as long as there's tools in place for us to be able to follow that, I'm okay with that.
Going on the website, with checks are listed with the numbers and all of that, sir. Council can help you once if you identify some duplication. You can call it. So council does that. Look at the on the website. Thank you. That's the council work. All right. Anything else that you want to ask from our auditor before I pursue? That's okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And you're gonna drive home, right? Yes, sir. You're gonna get one up that you lost on your way back.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, council. Now the time is come to raise your hand. Discuss and consider approving resolution 2016-03-10, accepting the fiscal year 2014/2015 year ending September 30, 2015 audit report from Gibson, Wheelock and Peterson, LLC, City of Alpine auditors. Do I hear a motion? Okay, you move to accept. Would you second? Okay, motion has been made and second to approve the resolution 2016-03-10. I have the resolution if you want to see it. We have it. All of you have copies of it. Great. And do you have any more discussion or anything to say? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. All for 5. Opposed? Nay? Same sign. Raise your hand if you're opposing it. Okay, I don't see any person changing his mind. Never mind. The motion passes, and council members' comments. I'll start with Nancy. Nancy, do you have any comments to make?
I'd like to thank the auditors for their presentation and the hard work they put in. And I'd like to thank people for coming. I'm sorry there aren't more people here and more comments from the public because this was an important issue to be discussed. But for those of you who did come and comment, thank you. Have a safe trip.
I too would like to thank the auditors for their hard work. I also would like to thank our city staff for their hard work and for us being in the black. It's really, really a good sign.
Chris? Again, kudos to the auditors. Be safe going home. After it gets a little dark, there's a lot of animals out there. I'll tell you. Press on.
Alice?
Thank you for the work you've done on the audit. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing the next.
I think, again, from my standpoint, good audit. Certainly, there's the four material weaknesses, but it sounds like they are embedded in what occurred over 2 years ago. I think the net position from the city standpoint, we have $2.1 million more assets in this city than we had last year, and our debt's down to $6.5 million. I think that's great news from the city standpoint. We have things to go work on, of course. We always do. That's why I have audits. I think we've again got a professional team from the audit standpoint and a professional city staff who's managing the principles and see the results. So thanks everyone for participating in this discussion.
Thank you. Let me ask the lawyer a question. Now that council has looked at the audit report, can it be shared with the public? Let it say that.
This
Can
question.
this audit report be shared with the public? Good, thank you. You don't have to wait for 30 days now. Well, again, thanks for coming, and I appreciate you coming over here and made a good presentation. Okay, anything else? Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Sorry. Okay, this meeting started adjourned. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Yeah, but